How are you? And you know what? We're getting marketing gurus, people that have created, you've had some interesting people we're talking today. But our
I know.
guest today, again, this is where I was trying to book one other guest involving entrepreneurship. And Kelly and I are entrepreneurs, Gordon, not to your scaled success and what you've done. I mean, we'd love to have 5 minutes with you anytime to talk and get that information. But Kelly, our guest today is really goes into what the stressors of being successful entrepreneur means and sometimes leading to addiction, because I think we all have a different DNA, Kelly, myself, and our guest.
Well, we all have a little addictions. We're human, right? And so our next guest is not unhuman, but he also has been in billion-dollar boardrooms in the darkest alley of addiction. Gordon Lowndes' story is unlike any you've heard. The visionary behind Sleep Country Canada opens up at the cracking up of a raw, gripping memoir of a 1,000-day descent into a crack cocaine addiction and the long road back. So I'm so excited to welcome you today, Gordon, and to hear about your story. And as an entrepreneur myself, I'm excited that you got through this and are able to help people.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm happy to share my story in the hopes that it might help some other folks.
Fantastic. So what happened?
Oh boy! So we were starting Sleep Country Canada in Vancouver, BC. It was a brand new company, and about a year into after the startup, I was spending a couple of days every 2 weeks in Seattle with my advertising agency. And I was divorced at the time. I was a committed workaholic. I was running, 16, 18 hours a day trying to get this business started. And in a lapse of judgment, I I encountered the ultimate femme fatale in a strip club. Um, and I, visited with her every couple of weeks when I was in Seattle. And then one day, about a year later, she arrived in Vancouver with all of her luggage and basically said, I'm moving in." Um, and I didn't invite her, but she was very persuasive. Let's put it that way. So I was working, as I said, still working crazy hours. So I wasn't really paying much attention to what she was up to. And in about 2 or 3 months after she moved in, I discovered she was a drug addict. And she finally broke down and admitted she was addicted to cocaine. I tried to get her into, we got her into a couple of treatment centers and she failed at each one. She just couldn't stick it out. And I finally said to her, I said, I can't live with a drug addict and do what I'm trying to do with my business. So you're going to have to go. And she said, well, why don't you at least try it once with me so you can see how it
Wow.
makes me feel and why it's so difficult to get off it. And I figured, fine, I like once is not going to kill me. And I've been through lots of things in my life. I've seen people in drug situations, and I didn't think it would be a problem. And so what happened was my introduction was basically smoking crack cocaine with her on a Friday night. I didn't know it was going to be crack cocaine, and I didn't even know what crack cocaine was at the time. So I did that, and my body and brain chemistry instantly had a very positive reaction to the cocaine. And I can remember it uh, vividly. Um, as soon as I took that first hit and the euphoria sort of overwhelmed me, I dropped to my knees and I said, I will be your slave forever. And what I didn't realize was that I was talking to the cocaine, I wasn't talking to her. So within six, I figured, well, this is fun. We had a wild party weekend, and I went to work next Monday, and I said, wow, I can party on the weekends, and this would be great, and it's a great stress reliever, and life will be wonderful. But within 6 months, I started to worry that I had a problem because the weekend started to sort of creep into Monday, and the weekend started creeping into Thursday,
Oh man.
and I realized I had a problem. Um, so that's how it started.
Wow.
Oh,
Kelly, I just have to say, wow,
wow.
I'll let you get that next question.
No, I I'm never speechless, and that is quite a story.
But it looks like a movie, Kelly. That
It
is
is a movie.
it's a movie in so many ways because we see these stories of these entrepreneurs doing coke, not crack as much, Gordon, and they're doing coke all the time and working
Mhm.
constantly and keep going. And I think you saw that gave you a certain high, didn't it, to keep working more at first, where you saw like, did it see
Yeah,
that as that value? I can keep going even further. I can become Superman because of what that drug kind of does to you.
yeah. I think from a business point of view, it didn't really re-energize me in any way. Um, but from a personal, I was chasing a hedonistic dream with this girl, and the combination, like the drugs, were basically fuel for that dream, and it was just a great relief. So on weekends, I can have a great time, and I can finally relax, and my mind will get itself off of the business and what was going on. And the problem was is that you know, within a year of that first event, I ended up shooting up cocaine, which is just completely insane. But it's what happens, with a drug addict. And for the next, basically 3 years, I was living this white knuckle charade, and sort of keeping the business going and terrified that people would find out I had a problem. And it was just completely insane. Let's put it that way.
Where is she now?
Uh, she About 2 years into my situation with her, she finally went back to Seattle, and I said, great, because if she's gone, then I won't have a problem, getting clean and sober, and I can clean my act up. But on my own, and because I was so highly addicted, with her gone, I would just kept on using and using and using. And then finally, what happened in May of 1988, I had basically told my partners that I had some health problems and I was going to take a leave of absence and I would be back to work on Labor Day. And they said, great. They didn't, probe in terms of what was going on. And I figured, well, with 3 months without having to show up for work and all the stress of that, I should be able to get my act together. But I couldn't. So it got worse because I was totally isolated. And what happened is 2 days late of my getting back to work, I had to phone my partner in Toronto and broke down and told him I had a problem with cocaine. So it was, and I was a complete, emotional disaster at that point. I was embarrassed. I was, filled with shame, filled with guilt. And I was expecting him to go, through the roof and, give me hell and be all that kind of stuff. And all he said was, look, he says, I'm really sorry. What can we do to help?
Hmm. That's a life lesson right there, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And Kelly, I think that what happens, Gordon, do you feel with the stress of entrepreneurship that also can lead to addiction as well? Working 16-hour days when you were doing it and over doing that in a certain way that you add something else that can be addictive in nature can cause that?
Yeah. Now in retrospect, I was a workaholic and I've been working hard, basically ever since I've been 16 years old. Um, and so work was and what they say is that a workaholic is basically using work to fill an emotional void in your life. Um, so it just takes over your life, and that's its own form of addiction.
Yeah.
And when I was in treatment, I was exposed to all these 12-step programs, Cocaine Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I suggested that they should start a program for Workaholics Anonymous. And they said, well, how would that work? And I said, well, if the prevalence of a 12-step program is abstinence, if you're a workaholic, you have to stop working. And people thought I was just being a smartass, but in many ways, it's true.
It is. No, but I can feel the emotion still there for
Yeah.
how many years have gone by. And as a person whose family does have addictions in it and have learned all about the AA program, the 12-step program, and also being in dietetics, food can be addictions. And
Yep.
when we got people off food, it turned into sex addiction and then turned into that. So, and we are, like I said, when we started this entire podcast today, we are all human. We are all flawed. And some people's addictions are hidden,
Yeah.
right? Yours was hidden for a long time. And so many other people's, and when we deal with eating disorders or disordered eating, are hidden. And some really show. So if someone's obese, you can see it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you can't see if someone is bulimic and is going and throwing up 5 times a day.
Yeah.
There's all these different things that we're hiding behind. And like you said, like, where is it coming from, and trying to fill that void. And I think being human, there are voids that we all have.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, how could you possibly keep the business going, in the middle of this addiction? And there's the term that they use called a high functioning addict or alcoholic. And my response is, I was a high functioning addict in two ways. I was high while I was functioning, but I was also functioning at a high level.
It's kind of funny. I mean,
all right. So
yeah.
what did the business end up doing, Gordon?
I got clean and sober in May of 1999. When I left, I went to treatment for 3 months. And when I left treatment, I basically told my partners I couldn't guarantee that I would be clean and sober, like could stay clean and sober. And I didn't want to put the company at risk. So I basically resigned from the company, but I still had my ownership position. And then 6 months after I got clean and sober, we sold the company to Bain Capital for a huge amount of money. And so I was basically, new in recovery and a multimillionaire. And as my therapist said, that's a complete recipe for disaster.
Yes, that is. So how did you stay clean?
So a lot of people, so my experience is that a combination of working in a 12-step community and having the benefit of a doctor who was a specialist in addictions was really what got me through my recovery process. But I was seeing the doctor for at least 5 years, every 2 weeks after I got clean and sober. And he was really, in many ways, the key to my sobriety. Mm-hmm. The 12-step people, it's a community of like-minded people. And I felt comfortable there because they were people just like me. But I eventually drifted away from that program because I was trying to maintain a life where I was with positive people. And there's so much victimhood in the 12-step recovery rooms and people complaining and whining and all that other stuff. I just found it too much, and it wasn't a healthy mental environment for me to be in. And my biggest complaint about addicts is, you can't blame your bad behavior on being an addict. Like that's just an excuse. So people have to take responsibility and basically not play the victim card, and do what it takes to take care of themselves and get clean and sober. And it's a tough road.
I do agree with you, though, because as family members have been in the program, sometimes they're not moving forward.
Yeah.
And I feel like with true therapy, that should be the goal, is to move you forward.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people in AA kind of stay together and they feed off each other a little bit. So it's interesting that you say that, because I do agree with you. Yeah. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic to have people that have gone through similar situations, but then also there should be like, okay, so what are we going to do to move forward?
Yeah. Yeah. And at one point I said to my doctor, I just spent sort of a winter down in Florida and down in Key West. And I came back and I said, I went to a bunch of meetings down there, and being, clean for a year in Cocaine Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, like, you're almost a hero. And I said, I was giving talks, and people were, asking for my advice. And I said to him, I could probably be a big wheel in Cocaine Anonymous someday. And he looked at me and said, no, don't do that.
Well, it sounds like you had a fantastic therapist as well, and support.
Yeah.
So after you sold the business, what did you go on to do?
So I spent a couple of years basically just focusing on my recovery, rebuilding my relationship with my daughter, which I had completely destroyed in the process of this addiction. And uh, I guess I was born to be an entrepreneur because in 2003 I started another business, which was Listen Up Canada, which is a hearing healthcare business. And so I started that business and I ran that business for 12 years and then sold it and retired again, and away you go. So
Wow.
I've just, I'm a curious person, and I think most entrepreneurs are curious people. And they look at things and say, and they wonder, like, what's going on there, or why is this the way it is? And that's how they come up with ideas for a new business. But the other thing I want to say about addiction is that in my experience and what I've learned is that a large number of people who have addiction problems have mental health problems too. And the way I describe it is, um, you know, the common theme among us is that there's a latent mental disorder or two that comes bubbling to the surface like a fart in a bathtub when you get clean and sober. And and so the problem is you get clean and sober and then you say, Jesus, like I'm still messed up. So there's a lot more work to do.
I agree. Our focus this year and our number one talk has been nutrition as it relates to mental health. And I think more people than we know are dealing with mental health. And I do think that the bottom line is starting with nutrition and making sure we're feeding our bodies what
Yep.
it needs and our brains what it needs. There's so many misguided conversations out there, and leading to decreased serotonin level,
Yep.
decreased dopamine. And it's just amazing when you can start looking at that and changing it over. And, I've seen it with my own children. And when they eat, the way that we want them to eat, it's unbelievable how their self esteem, how they present themselves, how they're, feeling that day is completely impacted.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of response that I've had from people who've had a chance to read the book is the strongest response has been from people in the mental health community in terms of, wow, this is a mental health story and you need to tell it from that perspective.
Yep.
So yeah.
You definitely do. Gordon, so basically, are you still with the business you own? Do you still do
No,
that?
no, no. I sold that last business in 2012, and but after that, I've made a couple of private equity investments. I've done some consulting, mostly in sort of small to medium sized companies to help them strategize around growth and that sort of thing. And I've basically just I've retired. I'm 77 years old, so you gotta stop working sometime.
I don't know. I think you got a lot of good wisdom inside you yet to help other people. I'm glad you're
Well,
sharing your story.
Yeah.
yeah, and that's the reason I decided to publish this now. I mean, there's no more collateral damage that I could do to my family or friends because they all know my story. There's no more collateral damage that I could have done to Sleep Country, which is what I was primarily concerned about. And I wrote this manuscript within 2 years of getting clean and sober, so it was very fresh in my mind. It was really a cathartic exercise, and I never intended to publish it. But I ended up meeting a publisher, after reviewing one of her books. And she's, when she found out sort of my story, she said, there must be a book in you. And I said, well, I have one on the shelf, but I never thought I'd publish it. And she talked me into it. So here we are.
That's fantastic. Kelly, just amazing to know these things, but it's interesting you talked about the mental health piece and nutrition. Do you feel that a lot of times when there's nutrition issues, then there's going to be
Yeah.
a process of addiction for sure?
Absolutely, absolutely. So now that we understand the physiology of the body and how it works and how these gut bacteria directly talk to our brains and they talk to the brain talks to them and it goes back and forth. And if they're not fed properly, there's going to be major, major issues there. They're now saying that about 70% of Americans are dealing with a digestive disorder, which puts
Wow.
them at great risk for mental health related issues, which then can put them at risk for addiction. So there's a lot tied into what we're learning now.
Yeah. And when I was in treatment, I met a lady there who'd been to treatment 4 times, And one was for a heroin addiction, one was for an eating disorder, another was for depression. I mean, it's just like she's got mental health issues,
Yep.
big time.
It's all tied together. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. I feel like for the first time, medical professionals and hopefully the people that are in the addiction places, that we're really looking at the food and counseling about that. I've now been in talks this year for the first time ever with some of these the treatment centers, and of what are you feeding people, because it's going to make a big difference in their recovery.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Well,
I appreciate your time. This was an intriguing story. You actually had me speechless. And I just appreciate you sharing this, and we'll get it out to as many people as possible.
Great. And I hope you read the book.
all right. So best place we can find it, Gordon.
It'll be in bookstores on August 15th and available on Amazon, Kindle, and if you want an early copy, I can email you an ebook version.
All right.
Amazing.
Your website, Gordon, for the
Yeah,
book?
GordonLowndes.com.
All right. Appreciate it, Gordon. Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Jordan.
All right. And Kelly, you can pick up your book.
Yeah, we're on Amazon. The New Weight Loss Era. Pick it up. Learn something about nutrition.
All right.